It's 18 minutes past 10. The protest group Insulate Britain has been responsible for bringing the M25 to a standstill 3 times this week as protesters block junctions on the UK's busiest motorway. There were also disturbances on the M3, M11 and M1. They want the UK government to bring forward its pledge to make sure every home in the UK is insulated. And they say that more action is on the way. Liam Norton is the spokesperson for the group. Hello, Liam.
Hi, Stephen.
Hiya. Why are you doing this?
We're doing this because we're in a crisis at the moment. So Sir David King, the former Chief Scientific Advisor to the British government, stated in February that what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. And basically what that statement means, what we really need to do is we need to read in between the lines of what that statement means. It means the suffering of millions in this country, and it means the destruction of our economy. It means the destruction of the very fabric of our society. And we're not seeing the urgency required from our government in terms of getting on with the job. So what we're looking for is for them to make a meaningful statement that they're going to start decarbonising the British housing stock because it's seen as the best value for money in terms of reducing emissions. It's going to create hundreds of thousands of proper, meaningful jobs for the people of this country, and it's going to stop thousands of our elderly from freezing to death each winter. 8,500 families lost people last year because they had to make the decision between eating or heating, and to be quite honest with you, we shouldn't be putting up with that in 2021.
Liam, many people might agree with what you've said, but they might also think that the way we do things in this country is we have a democratic elected parliament, we have representatives of that democracy throughout every single borough of the country, and they might be saying, who gives you the right to stop them going to work? Who gives you the right to block them when they're trying to get home? And we've got elected representatives to make these decisions and to represent the people. You lot are unelected, and you're deciding unilaterally to disturb people's freedom and lives.
Yeah, and those
get
people
off the motorways, in other words.
Yeah. So those people that would say that would be like historically illiterate in terms of the history of this country and how rights were won, etc. In terms of when a government isn't fulfilling its primary responsibility, which is to protect the people that it governs, then therefore it's morally justifiable for people of that country to rebel and to resist the criminal inaction or action, whichever the case may be, of that particular government.
Well, it's not criminal inaction. It's criminal to stand in the motorway.
Stephen, the reason why you're unable to connect emotionally to the fact that it's criminally negligent is because you haven't listened to the statement that I made at the start of this interview, which is that what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. Sure. And this is the
Liam, I don't want to fight with you tonight, and I want us to have a conversation. I want to give you lots of space, but you don't know anything about me, so don't be telling me what I do or don't connect with in my personal life. The point I'm putting to you tonight is, why don't you stand for election? Then you're powerful. Why don't you go to Parliament Square? Why don't you oust your local MP who's not delivering for you? But what you're doing is you're stopping ordinary men, women and children getting to school, coming home from school, driving to hospital, going to see their parents. And is there not an arrogance about it?
Yeah, so Stephen, a few years ago, right, I was an electrician, and I'm still an ordinary person. I was working on building sites, and I was quite unaware in terms of how catastrophic this crisis was. And I went to some talks, and I became educated, and I started to learn about how catastrophic this crisis was, how about the Arctic sea ice is almost gone, and how the NOAA, the National Atmospheric Association in America, have predicted that by 2034 we're going to see a blue ocean event, and the consequences for the weather around the world once we lose the Arctic. And I started to become aware that governments had known this for 30 years, since the first COP back in 1990. So I was an ordinary person, Stephen, right? I am one of those people that you're talking about that's being disrupted. What the situation that we're currently in is that we are in an emergency state here, right? And it's the actions that we're seeing from Insulate Britain last week are the final straw. What we're saying is we're marking a line in the sand, and what we're saying to the government is, you cannot cross this line any longer. We are not willing to put up with this criminal negligence that you're currently acting with, you know. So, and this is the minimum thing that government should be doing. I'm not an insulation or a retrofit expert, but I've been looking into this stuff for the last few years, and it blows my mind the amount of work that needs to be done in terms of decarbonising the British housing stock, and that's just 15 to 20% of emissions. So the fact that this hasn't even properly started, and when we look at the Green Homes Grant of £1.5 billion that was scrapped, we're looking at less than 1% of the money, Stephen, that's required. So when they're talking about how they're acting in terms of climate change, when you actually look at what they're doing, they're kind of murdering us, really. They're not doing anywhere near what's required. And that's why you're seeing ordinary people. We're seeing 82-year-old old-age pensioners on the road last week that went out 3 times because they're absolutely at their wits' end in terms of what this government is failing to do to protect the British people.
But you're not disrupting the government, are you? I'm coming back to my central point. You're nowhere near the government.
Well, I mean, You're
standing at a junction. You're disrupting ordinary people who may or may not have their homes insulated, may or may not support your cause. You're drawing police officers to the scene when they could be catching criminals. And I just wonder how democratic your organisation is. Who decides which junction to interrupt? How many of you are there?
Well, Stephen,
how many's in your group?
How many's in the group? Well, we've got 80. Yeah. We've got about 87 people. We had about 91 people arrested on Monday, 89 on Wednesday, and I think there was about 85 on Friday. And there's more people that are joining the campaign next week.
So how many people are in your group in total?
But what you were saying about democracy in terms of... Can you repeat
people
that question again? People in your group
in total. Just give me Yeah. How many people are in your group in total?
Stephen, we're asking people to join in this campaign. There isn't a fixed figure. This campaign is ongoing until we get a meaningful statement from the government that they're going to look after the British people.
Yes, you sound like an articulate guy. You really do. I mean that. Yeah. I'm not being patronising. But I just wonder how this country can function if groups of people think that they've got the right to stop other people getting home, driving along a road, whatever the cause. So your cause is Insulate Britain. And anti-abortionists or pro-abortionists or whatever, do they block roads too? And then people who are against vaccines, do they block roads? And where does this all end? People who are against the tax rates and the government introducing the new tax rates, do they block the roads too?
Well, confused.
Can you understand how there needs to be at least some type of system in a democratic country where you articulate your views through an elected representative, and of course freedom to protest and the right to peaceful protest is enshrined in our democracy, but not stopping builders and nurses and workers getting up the road home. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah, but you're confusing this with an issue. And what I've just said to you is that the statement that Sir David King says, right, the former chief scientific advisor, when he says what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity, Stephen, what that means is that within a few decades, everything that you hold dear, all those, you talked about builders and nurses, so our economy is going to collapse. Our health system is going to collapse. Everything that we hold dear is going to collapse, Stephen, right? So you're confusing this with just another issue. And this is the issue of our times
in your
as
view.
Human beings. This is
in your view.
No, this isn't. This is where you're wrong, because you're not accepting the reality, Stephen. Okay, I'm not here to try and convince you of an ideology. I'm here trying to express to you that there's a physical reality that is occurring, and that is that the world is warming to such an extent that it's going to affect the very way that we live in this country, and the very foundations of all the different institutions are at very, very risk of collapse. So this isn't just another issue, okay? So this is the point. And what we've seen in history is that there are certain moral issues that they transcend the ordinary politics of the day. So when we look at racism in the 60s in America, you know, people said to those people, well, why don't you just, put someone up for office and you could change things through politics? And it wasn't possible in America in the 50s and 60s. So a group of people resisted that immorality that occurred at the time. And this is the point that people listening to this program and the people in the country need to understand at the moment. And not everybody does, and because it's a really difficult reality to face. But this is the thing, is that there is an immorality going on, in that the governments of the United Kingdom know full well how dangerous the plight is for the people in this country, and yet they are not even doing the bare minimum. And the bare minimum is to insulate and retrofit the houses of this country in order to get on with the job of decarbonising Britain's housing stock. And in terms of the resistance that we've seen last week, we've been saying all along, if a meaningful statement is made by the government that they're going to get on with this job, we will stop the actions on the motorway immediately.
And if not?
They will continue.
Right.
We're continuing this campaign. This isn't a protest, Stephen. This is an act of citizens making a real statement to this government that we're not willing to put up with this criminality that is going on. That's what this is about, this campaign. It's not your ordinary protest. This is a campaign of sincerely committed people who understand that there is a morally bankrupt government who are not looking after their people properly. And we're putting ourselves into this position of, and we accept the awful...
That's a government, that's a government which has a significant mandate for it.
A significant mandate?
Yes,
oh, what, you mean
a significant
in terms
mandate.
of the seats?
That's a government who stood in front of the country and were given a mandate from men and women up and down the country to run the country. And that's what happens every 4 years. Have you any mandate?
Well, what we have is this physical reality, Stephen, okay? And
no, but do you have a mandate? No, you don't.
It's about law, isn't it? The government have an obligation to uphold the Paris Agreement.
That's the government which has an 80-seat majority.
But Stephen, they're not upholding that law. They are obliged by law to uphold that Paris Agreement. And the current way that they're going, in the current direction, they're going to break that law. So in English common law...
But they haven't broken it, have they?
No, they are. They are breaking it because it's already been accepted that that 1.5 degrees is a complete... it's going to be missed. So in terms of Alok Sharma...
That's a target. Target.
Yeah, but they've already accepted that target's going to be missed. And now they're in...
Yes, but it's a target. It's not the law.
No,
it's
but
a
2
target.
degrees... No, 2 degrees is law. The 2008 Climate Act states in law that they have to keep below that. And in the current trajectory, they're going to break that law. And in English common law, it is legal to cause disruption if you were going to prevent greater disruption, okay? And we've seen the effect in Germany last week in terms of, in Belgium, did you see the 90,000 tonnes of rubbish from the floods in Belgium that were on the motorway because they had nowhere left to put it? We've seen old age pensioners drowning because they couldn't escape flooding.
Can I just ask one final question? And what I might do, Liam, 1 second, mate. I might actually bring you on later on because there's some callers who we can get to talk to you. But just one final question from me, because I've got to go to the news. You see, when all of these cars that you're blocking are sitting on the motorway, right?
Yeah.
Is that not generating more pollution as they're all sitting stuck in traffic jams because of you lot?
Stephen, I know you didn't want me to get personal, mate, right? And I know, and what I'll go back to this thing of like, I understand that emotionally it's difficult to accept the gravity of the words that I'm saying in terms of what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. And you're talking about idling cars, and it's less than 0.1%, 0.001% of in terms of emissions in this country. So let's be honest with ourselves about the figures that we're talking about. We're having a serious discussion, and you're talking about less than 0.1% in terms of the UK's emissions, and we both know that it's a ridiculous thing to say.
I'm talking the bigger point, which I'm
talking about the bigger point as well, mate. I'm talking about the end of the human race. And you're talking about a few engines that are on.
No, what I'm talking to you about, what I'm talking to you about is where you think you've got the right to decide who gets home, when they get home, what streets will be blocked. You haven't been able to tell me how many people
when the end of the world's at stake.
You haven't been able to tell me how many people are in your group. You haven't been able to tell me what gives you the right to decide to disrupt other members of the public. And you have not been able to tell me how democratically elected politicians and then a government does not have the authority to decide what to do in this country, rather than a group of unnamed, unelected, unaccountable people.
I'm naming
like
myself.
You.
I've named myself in the interview. Everybody that's been arrested has been named. We've all been named, and you haven't listened to anything I've said in terms of
I've listened to you very carefully tonight, Liam, and I think I've given you a lot of time, mate.
You have, Stephen, and I appreciate it. You have, and I appreciate it.
Listen, Liam, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, sir. 08085 909 08085 909 693. If you want to react to what Liam Norton has been saying, we'll go to the news now at 10:36.